Well, that was a boring race, but there are some serious consequences. It's only the second race of the 2025 F1 season, and some teams are overperforming while others are making some serious errors. I'm Rachel, and here are my race ramblings for the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix. Overall race and weekend rating, I've given the Chinese Grand Prix a 5 out of 10. The race specifically was pretty boring, as I had mentioned. There was no racing for the lead. We pretty much knew it was going to be Oscar the entire time. There was no safety cars, no reds, hardly any pit stops. Most of the drivers only did a one stop, some did two, but obviously that didn't work out. There was some overtaking in the back, but the race was very processional, not quite to the extent of a Monaco or Singapore, but it was quite poor. We've had worse, of course. The overtaking in the back saved it a bit, but I did not stay up for that race, and I'm grateful. I thought I might have, and then I realized that that race started at 3 a.m. my time, so I would have gone to sleep, woken up at 3 a.m., gone back to sleep at like 5:30 in the morning. Like, no, that would have screwed me up too much. And it was quite boring, so again, I'm grateful I didn't. And also that meant as soon as I finished the race, I logged on to social media and learned of the disqualifications, so there was no gap in that. I likely will be watching the rest of the races live. Japan starts at 1 a.m. for me, so that's not too bad. Australia was midnight, so these are all decent times. I can watch those. It's like, do you guys watch all of the races live? Like, I just couldn't. It's like, if I was waking up really early, I could, but the 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. and waking up in that time period, I think would just screw me up far too much. I just couldn't. Okay, we're gonna hit all of the competitive sessions here, which is most of them, so this might be a bit of a longer video, though I do have to stop this at least within 1 hour because IndyCar is starting soon. And by the way, I'm going to be doing a review of Thermal as well. I'm hoping to do a review of every single F1 and IndyCar race this season. I've already done a review of St. Pete, so if you're curious, you can watch that. And if you missed last week's review of Australia, you can watch that as well. All right, so into the sprint quali. This I also did not watch live. I got messed up and didn't realize that it was really happening when it did. Again, time change really happened over Thursday into Friday. So I woke up without even like thinking I shouldn't just go on social media, and I saw Lewis Hamilton had pole, and wow, what a shock that was. I was not expecting it. One, just to see any news in general, but also to see the news of Lewis Hamilton on pole was surprising. I did not expect Lewis to get up to speed this quickly. Yeah, it was, I really thought this was going to take more time. I thought it could have taken the whole season. Obviously, we've now seen that he's gotten quite up to speed quite quickly. There's still some kinks to work out, especially with getting the engineering and that communication down right, as we've seen throughout the race. But he's there. He understands the car to the point that Charles actually said it seemed that he outperformed the car on Friday to get this pole position. So I'm very happy to see that, though, as we might be seeing, it might be causing some problems that Ferrari weren't quite prepared to deal with yet in terms of team orders and things, keeping both drivers happy. I think I wasn't expecting that this season again because I thought Hamilton would take a year or so to really get up to speed, but it seems like that this could already go in the same direction that Oscar and Norris could go. Oscar and Lando could go with the McLarens. It'll be interesting to see how those both play out. Two teams with fantastic drivers that are both, all four, ready to win a championship this season. So that'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I'm quite looking forward to that. Thank God that Lewis Hamilton got this pole position because other than the sprint win, which we will get into, they really needed that. I think a lot of the Ferrari fans and the Ferrari team in general, all of them needed it as a boost to the moral to know that after Australia, okay, the car is there. We can race with this car, especially after the disqualification, which we will get into later. To have something, some evidence and some real points here is important. Not a ton of points, but some. Other than that, not many notes here. Again, I did not watch this live. I did end up watching Q1 and Q2 while I was on the train to class, but then I was having streaming issues with Q3, so I didn't watch all of that. Lawson, just nowhere. We'll talk about this throughout. I'm kind of impressed by how poorly this is. I don't think this is up to Lawson. I firmly believe you put Yuki in there, you put Isaac Hadjar in there, you even keep Perez in there. I think they would have been performing similarly. Maybe not qualifying P20, but the car is just difficult. Of course, it's on Lawson and any driver in there to adapt, but nobody's going to be able to perform in that car the way Verstappen does. I think Verstappen's really the only driver that can really drive that car. But I'm just impressed that it's really P20, especially when you think of like Bortoleto and the Sauber. I'm not expecting that to be well, but again, that's the whole issue with Red Bull. It's fast, but it's just so hard to control. You're better off being a Bortoleto in maybe a worse car that's easier to drive in some sense. I'm surprised by how low Norris was, both in actual performance and in energy. He's very open about how he feels, and that's positive and negative. Just a general note, not super specific to now necessarily, though he did seem very lost with the car. So I'm kind of interested to see what happened, what changes they made in between Friday qualifying here in the sprint race and Saturday qualifying for the Grand Prix and the race. Happy that they picked it up. I wasn't really expecting that, but it's nice to see Oscar ahead here. Sonoda qualifying P8 and Alex Albon P9. For Sonoda especially, I'm excited for him for that. He's obviously has something to prove this season now that we know that Honda won't be helping him get a seat, so I'm happy to see him up here. Alex Albon P9 also, very happy for that. This is a good boost for the moral, and over the whole weekend, which we'll chat on more, it seemed like maybe that the Williams was a bit of a fluke in Australia, and it's seeming less so. Signs up to P13, not fantastic, but it'll do. Stroll out qualifying Alonso here, not by much, but still made it to Q3, and Alonso didn't. And pretty good from the rookies. We have all of them up. The lowest rookies obviously Lawson in P20, then we have Doohan in P16, then Hadra, then Bortoleto, Behrman up in P12, Antonelli P7. They've done pretty well in this session, which is interesting because I think a lot of people, myself included, maybe didn't expect them to do so well this weekend, and maybe overall they didn't, but for this to be they had one practice session and then straight into this, pretty fantastic. Moving on to the sprint race itself, it was quite boring, except for Lewis. Of course, I was excited for Lewis to win something, and again, those were very necessary points. I wish Charles would have ended up a little higher up, but that's just not how it played out. Again, proving that Ferrari does have race pace, which Leclerc did mention in the post-race show. The post Grand Prix show, he mentioned that it seems that they're struggling with qualifying pace, which is concerning, especially at tracks like this where qualifying seemed to really matter, especially as we were proven in the sprint race here. Really not much going on at all. Once you got stuck behind somebody, you were stuck there with all that dirty air. So that's concerning for the Ferrari, but they obviously have the race pace, and that is crucial, and they'll really have to be utilizing that on the tracks where they can be overtaking and work on the quality pace in tighter circuits like this that are harder to overtake. Again, pretty poor from Norris. Again, I'm really curious what they changed here to really make the rest of Saturday and Sunday a success. Obviously, whatever that they worked, especially for Norris. Oscar was always there, but for Norris, a big improvement that he had in between the sprint and the rest of the weekend. That kind of sucked for Carlos. I'm not sure why he had to pit, but that he could have done much better. Though he did really make it up. Because he pit, he was 20 seconds behind everybody else, and then he made it up. I don't know if that was all the rookies battling each other that slowed everyone down and so he could catch up, or if there's just some real pace in that Williams that he was able to extract. But either way, happy to see that he did that. He's obviously still figuring out the Williams a little bit, so I'm happy to see that he had something there. Though he didn't necessarily overtake. We'll get into that right now. Jack Doohan, man. He obviously has pace. He's obviously a great driver. Keeping in mind that he was out for a season. All the other rookies were racing last year. Jack Doohan wasn't. So it's not a surprise that he's lost a bit of his racecraft, which he'll have to build back up. And I'm confident he can. But that with the pressure on him, that lockup he had into Bortoleto that caused all that problems, and that's what let Sainz through. Just can't be making those mistakes, especially when there's all this pressure on him. Of course, he is making these mistakes because of the pressure on him, but I hope he can snap out of it, and I hope he can pick it back up and get going, because there's obviously some real pace and talent in there. Battle of the rookies with the rest of them. Liam Lawson was fighting a little dirty, in my opinion. You can really see that he feels he has something to prove, which I think he does. He's had a bit of an ego going into this season and even racing last year, as you could see how he was given the finger to Perez, to now be performing like this is like, yeah, dude, maybe you shouldn't have done that, because now it makes you look not good, to put it nicely. And that racing was a little harsh. Again, it kind of felt very Max Verstappen. It felt very almost, I don't want to call it like bully-ish, but you can see why Red Bull wanted him. You can see why Red Bull had the belief in them. But when it's not working out, it just looks rude, honestly. But he does have something to prove there, so to an extent you understand why. Gasly actually had a pretty good race, and I don't see many people talking about him because he finished P12, but he started P17. He made up some good steps, so that's exciting to see for the Alpine. The Alpine wasn't great this weekend. Again, I don't know, maybe that's because of the changes that they had to make with the new wing requirements, just kind of things not quite working out. We'll talk about this more, but the Alpines really are not performing where I anticipated them to be. So that was the sprint. Some decent points for some people. Sonoda up there got some points. Thankfully, we'll talk about him more, but he really is not getting the points he deserves. The racing bulls in general are not having the outcome that their performance from a car and racing perspective deserves. So I'm happy that Sonoda got some points there. All right, moving on to qualifying for the Grand Prix. That was an interesting session. I wasn't as fun as I think it could have been. I'm happy that Piastri got pole. I didn't realize that was his first Grand Prix pole. I guess he's got a couple sprint poles. So good for him. I think he's established himself, and that will feel really good after Australia. Australia is going to burn forever, especially because that's his home race. But to come here and do it, I think that'll feel good for him. Lawson last again. My notes say, my word, man. Yeah, like all the things I said before, and now, like, it's kind of embarrassing. I don't say that to be mean, but when you're talking yourself up like this and this is the performance you're having, it's embarrassing. And again, it's because the Red Bull is difficult to drive. I really don't think you could put anywhere else in there and they'd be performing better. That's not necessarily true. The top chunk of drivers could go in there and be performing better, but I think Max Verstappen knows that car more than anybody else. He's the only one that can extract any type of performance from it. But P20 is just not good. It's really not. All the rookies were out in Q1, and Pierre Gasly, well, not all the rookies. Antonelli and Hadjar made it through, but it was all rookies plus Pierre Gasly making it out getting out in Q1. Sorry. Makes sense. Again, it's kind of interesting that they did better in sprint quali than they did here. Not sure why that would happen. You'd think it'd be the opposite. But Pierre Gasly the Alpine's kind of weird, man. But in the end, it's kind of good for Jack Doohan that Gasly is having, in the end, similar performances to him, because it protects Doohan a little bit. You can't place the blame on Doohan for dragging the team down and out when Gasly is having similar performances. I'm happy for Sainz for making it out of Q1, but finishing 15th is whatever. Again, he'll get there. Nico Hulkenberg came out. I'm not sure what the Sauber is. I think the Sauber is a better car than I thought it was. Just some things not going quite right with the car this weekend. So I was surprised to see them make it out of Q1, but I really shouldn't have been considering last weekend. They were so bad last year that it's still in my mind. The Racing Bulls, I was very impressed with. Very happy for Isaac Hadjar oh my God, where is he on my list? He's not here. Where did he go? Oh, there he is. Sorry, I'm seeing things. I thought he would be below Sonoda. I didn't realize he outqualified Sonoda. Hadjar's in P7. Sonoda's in P9. That's fantastic for Isaac Hadjar. He obviously has talent. I really did not go into last week and expecting much from him, and I was very pleasantly surprised by how he performed and what he did get to do, even though he didn't get to race, and how he handled himself. I was very impressed with that. So to see him up here in P7, I'm very happy for him. I hope that feels good. Like for Lawson to be the worst qualifying and the worst performing Red Bull car of all the cars this weekend, wow. We'll talk more about that, but just wow a bit, And yeah, there's a lot to say about Red Bull, and we'll get into it later. Here, the Ferrari's not great. Again, it seems that Hamilton outperformed the car on Friday, and again, thank God he did. They've got to work on that qualifying pace, but P5, P6, not too bad. As long as they're not being outqualified by like the Racing Bulls and the Williams, which they aren't yet, I'm okay with that. There's room for improvement there. Alex Albon up there again, proving it's not a fluke, proving there's some real pace in the car. I'm excited for Science to get back up to speed to start being there with Alex Albon. We'll chat about this a bit more, but I kind of thought that Sainz over the season would outscore Alex Albon. Now I'm not quite so sure. I think by the end of it, he'll be outperforming Alex Albon, but all the points Alex is getting here, to be honest, could be making a big difference over the course of the season. And if things change and the Williams starts going lower down in the standings, whether they take a step back or other teams take a step forward, the points Alex Albon is getting here are crucial and can make a big difference, both for Williams and for the teammates and how they end up. Antonelli up here in P8. He's doing quite well compared to the rookies, out-qualified by Isaac Hydra this weekend, which again is a surprise because I'm rating both of them very highly. Again, much higher than I anticipated they would. I thought that they would need some time to speed up. Antonelli especially had no expectations for him this year. I'm very impressed with him. I'm surprised by Verstappen, to be honest, that he was as low but also as high as he was. Again, I think it just really is proving that Verstappen is a crazy driver. If he can get that and Lawson is P20, that's much more of a show. That's a show of how poor the car is, but also a show of how amazing Verstappen is, more so than it is of how bad Lawson is. We have the McLarens and with Oscar P1 and Lando P3. That makes sense to me. Again, I thought I would, from the start of this weekend, I would have thought Lando would have been lower down, but again, they must have made a change that had made a difference. Though they are more dominant than I expected them to be. 2 pole positions back to back is maybe not what I was expecting. Especially because it seems sometimes you do get more variance in qualifying than we do in the racing, but of course the racing is not much variance either. So I'm hoping this will get a bit more competitive over the season. It'll be interesting to see how these things play out, because especially with Lawson not performing, that's an extra spot in the top 10 that it has room for competition. And the fact that both Racing Bulls are up there, it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Because I don't see Lawson becoming consistently part of the top 10, to be honest. I think that would have to be a big step up from Lawson and a big step up in the drivability from the car that in the end could make it slower. So I don't know if there's always room for him up there. And considering we have, the rest of the top that I'd expect up there with both of the McLarens, both of the Ferraris, both of the Mercedes, there's a bit more room up there than maybe there was last season for some of the other guys to sneak in, and so far they are. With that, let's move on to the race. Very solid win from Oscar Piastri. Not a super exciting win. He actually did say himself it was the least emotional win, but the most satisfying, which makes sense, especially coming off Australia. It'll just feel good to have something there. It was a very dominant performance. Maybe not as much as Lando necessarily, and for sure not as stressful as Lando's last weekend. I think Lando's put under a bit more of a test, but Oscar did the thing. He led it most of the time, not the whole time. But he was always in the lead when you factored out pit stops and everything. A very solid win from him. Norris P2 was expected. I have to say it was a good start for him to overtaking George. I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't a fight. But again, that was maybe a tire wear thing. Norris was obviously trying not to wear out his tires by not wanting to go up into Oscar's dirty air, but then that prevented any racing. I wonder how much more of a margin they would have won by had they all pushed a little bit more. Though if that happened, maybe they wouldn't have been able to do a one stop. And again, tire wear did seem a bit better with these conditions than on Saturday. So it makes sense that they both won, but it's kind of went a lot smoother than I maybe anticipated. Not for Piastri, because based on how the sprint race went, it seemed pretty obvious whoever was in the lead was kind of going to win the race. Whoever started on pole was going to win the race. Sorry. But I kind of expected more from Norris. I think because he never wanted to get in the dirty air, he never went and did anything. I don't know if there's any team orders I missed. because they wanted Norris to get up there a bit more to push it. So I don't know, kind of interesting to me that there was just never a fight. Coming here after the IndyCar race, guys, how did I forget that Lando Norris, his brakes just like broke? How did I forget that? How did I think, why didn't he catch up to Oscar? Yeah, because he like had no brakes. And they had to tell him, hey dude, chill out so you can actually finish the race and not like crash into a barrier because your brakes have failed. Yeah, coming back here just to add that in, because that's obviously important context. That's why Oscar like ran away with the win a little bit and he didn't fight with Lando. Lando literally couldn't fight. Interesting that both Lando and Alonso had a brake issue. I wonder if that's something in the air, something about Shanghai, or if it was maybe just a potential reliability issue popping up for the McLaren. I don't know. I'm not hoping that McLaren has a reliability issue, but I think it could help make some fun. So we'll see how that plays out over the season. Speaking of that, in the one stop, that really surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. I was hearing chatter of that from George and from Charles Leclerc, and I was like, no way. Literally no way it's a two stop or a one stop. I was thinking it was a 2 to 3 stop, and I think that's my IndyCar brain thinking more pit stops. But in the end, it being a mid stop is kind of what made it a boring race because there was less room for change, which is why if you maybe thought this was boring, you should check out IndyCar because they always do more pit stops due to just needing to refuel, and you would probably like it. I've done a lot of videos about why you should watch IndyCar. There's an IndyCar 101 video. Watch IndyCar. Okay, anyways, back to this. And it's one of those things where it's like it only worked because everybody did it. Obviously, Lewis didn't do it, and that did not work out well for him. But like if everybody did a 2-stop, it would have been a much more interesting race. It kind of makes you wonder if we should maybe mandate more stops. The same way Monaco is now going to be a 2-stop. Maybe it'd be more fun to do that for every race. I don't know, because then you're interfering a bit more and you're not letting it, like it's kind of fun for when it's a 1-stop and you can really see how far ahead the dominant cars can be than everybody else. Yeah, I don't know. I thought maybe the one stop would only work for Leclerc if he ever changed his wing, because that would be a longer pit stop that he'd need to make up, and that obviously never changed the wing, never got anywhere really with that, which we will chat about now. The Ferraris, we're gonna ignore the disqualification for now, and we'll talk about that later. That contact was a bit of a racing incident, maybe the start of something that we don't really want. Again, like I said, there's room now that Hamilton is up there, like confidently, he's comfortable in the car, which again, maybe that was just a 1 weekend thing. I don't know. Hamilton does have more experience here in China, especially than most others. And we were here for last year, but there was a gap. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a China thing. I don't think Ferrari was anticipating having to deal with that as soon as they are, especially with the little tap. It caused a bit of an issue, especially when you factor in then that they had to do the swap, which Hamilton initially seemed hesitant on. He said, well, yeah, we'll do it, but he's got to get closer to me. And then he never backed off, and eventually they did swap it. Charles did talk about that and said that, he doesn't blame Lewis for being like that, especially because it was a difficult situation when you consider that Leclerc did have the broken wing. So it made sense if they were going to let him get ahead so then they can pit. It's sort of unclear of how much damage that broken wing actually did to the pace. I don't know, because he seemed to be able to hang on to it fine, though I'm sure if he did have the wing, he would have been able to go faster, had better performance. He ended up in P5 and Hamilton ended up in P6 prior to the disqualification. Yeah, not great. It was for sure the wrong choice to pit Lewis Hamilton and do the 2-stop when literally nobody else did, because of course you're never going to make that up. He kind of did make it up, but like you're never going to get back in the fight if nobody else is doing that. I don't know, kind of a poor strategy weekend for them. I'm happy that Lewis won the race to give us something, the sprint race to give us something, because this doesn't feel good, especially when you add in the disqualification, which we'll talk about a little bit later. A horrific start to the season for Ferrari. Do you know who else is having a horrific start to the season? Fernando Alonso. Just like 2 DNFs back to back. He's not finished a race yet this season. Very difficult start for him. He had the brake failure here, the brake fire here, and then the spin out, whatever, in Australia. It's concerning to me only like because he's older, and it's like if he's not doing anything, like why would he want to be here competing? I don't know if he'll necessarily give up on 2026. I think he'll still do 2026, but that's a big blow to the ego and confidence and drive to want to perform. Bortoletto had a little spin there at the start that kind of really took him out of contention immediately, and I think Hulkenberg also had some troubles. They both would have finished last had Yuki Tsunoda's wing not just decided to break. That was strange. That was so strange. I watched the replay of that and it just said, yeah, no, we're gonna fail. So weird. They for sure would have been last. Again, I can't tell where they are. To me, if I'm thinking from last season, last makes sense, but their performance in the car seems to be better than there. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Yeah, I wrote that they're so bad, but I'm really not sure they are. So we'll have to see how that goes. And then Yuki, God, I just feel so bad for Yuki because for him and all of Racing Bulls with Hadjar included, their performance is not being shown by the actual outcome. Yuki was doing quite well until he had that issue, and that's just such an unlucky issue. Like, literally nothing he could have done at all. We'll talk about him a bit more later when we talk about that, the things coming up at Red Bull, but I just feel for him, and I hope he gets to stay in that car. I want him to stay in the Racing Bulls. We'll talk about that in a second. Ollie Behrman, up in P8. Very good race for him. He had multiple overtakes. The little chow bit he had was quite funny. I quite enjoyed that. Good race for him. I'm very impressed. PA getting some points. I think he was he in the points regardless. I can't remember. But that makes it double points for Haas. Ocon up in P5 as well is fantastic. I'm thrilled with them, to be honest, especially with the Cadillac coming in next year. They're proving the point as they're the original American team. Jack Doohan, on the other hand, I think he ended up with 2 penalties. God. Like, at least a 10-second penalty. Like I said, there's performance in him, but I think the pressure is getting to him and making him mess up, and it, again, doesn't help that he took a year off, and so he's now just getting comfortable racing again. It just needs to be better. It just needs to be, like, he's got to get it under control, because we're hearing rumors that they could already be thinking about Colapinto, which I don't think is fair. I don't think Colapinto would have performed any better in this race. And again, it helps that Gasly was disqualified and then Doohan ended up being the better finisher. But I think maybe the week off will do him some good and come back. And he's got to keep it under control. We had Lawson up in P12, a bit of an improvement, but again, really just nowhere. Didn't really make any moves today when you consider that Ollie Behrman came up in P8 and Hadjar was still ahead of him. Not fantastic. Had Tsunoda not had the issue that he had, he would have again been the lowest finishing Red Bull, and that's just like not acceptable when you're in the Red Bull. Hadjar had a good few fights. He had some good defending there. Him and Doohan had a bit of a thing. Happy for him to just finish the race. I wish that he could have got up to the P10 to get some points. I think that would have felt good, but Sainz in the points makes me feel good. Though again, it's coming from a disqualification and a post-race thing, and it's a bit of a pattern for Sainz to have good things happen to him for the first couple times post-race. Alex Albon up there in the points as well, P7. He was in the points regardless, if I'm remembering correctly, so I'm happy for that. Verstappen had a bit of a fight at the end there with Leclerc. Obviously, he overtook Leclerc, which was interesting because everybody had really pulled away from him at the beginning stages of the race. So for him to come back is interesting to me. I don't know if it was him coming back so much as it was like Leclerc had used up his tires trying to overtake on George Russell, and then he sort of fell back down from that, and Verstappen didn't wear his tires as much, so he came back up. I don't know, that was interesting to me. But again, P4, no podium for him yet this season, which even by the end of last year's standards is pretty interesting. And then a great bounce back for the Haas, double points for them, very excited for them there. Okay, into the disqualifications. That's like bad for Ferrari, just quite poor. So Pierre Gasly disqualified for being underweight, same issue for Charles Leclerc, and then Lewis Hamilton was disqualified because the plank under his car was too worn. It was too thin for what it should have been. The Gasly and Leclerc makes sense, sort of the same issue we saw at Spa with George Russell that year. Last year, you run too long and the tires all of a sudden way less than you were anticipating them to do. If you thought you were going to do a 2-stop and you only did a 1-stop, the tires way less from degradation. Add that to losing the part of the wing for Leclerc. It's understandable why he was underweight. Lewis Hamilton, that's just an issue. That's a setup issue. Shouldn't have happened. Hoping that's not becoming a real pattern. If I'm remembering correctly, there was an issue last year. I think Leclerc was disqualified from a race because the plank was too worn. So a bit of a pattern with setup issues with Ferrari, and they need to get that solved, because when you are fighting this tight, and especially when you are having issues with your qualifying pace, you can't have disqualifications and poor strategy like last year be taking the points away from you, because this is a big knock. Again, it's not that there's not performance of the Ferrari, but if these are detrimental points that are being taken away, and that's got to be figured out, because you can't be losing a driver's championship, being lower in a constructor's championship because of this. And it seems extreme to say that at the second race, but when you see how well the McLaren is performing and that Norris is in the lead, you've got to get it together. George Russell was on the podium again, a very solid race from him, holding off Charles Leclerc and Antonelli down in P6. They're doing better than I thought they would, and that's mostly down to Antonelli performing much stronger at the gate than I thought he would. I think they're a real threat to Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. I'm now feeling very confident that McLaren will win the Constructors' Championship. I think I predicted Ferrari second and Mercedes third. I'm thinking that could be swapped. Just, even it could come, like I said, with the Ferrari issue, it could come down to just these 2 weekends being very poor, and that could just make the points difference in boosting Mercedes. Let's now move into the driver standings after the Chinese Grand Prix. So we still have Norris in the lead with 44 points. We have Verstappen second with 36 points. Not a huge gap, but maybe more of a gap than you would have anticipated after the first 2 races. There was a potential for Verstappen to take the lead of the championship if he had won the sprint race, and I'm grateful he didn't. We need a break. We need more of a break, as I mentioned last week. And the last time he didn't win the Drivers' Championship, was spring in 2022. So I'm enjoying this at least while I can. If my prediction is correct, he won't win the Drivers' Championship. Verstappen, that is. And I hope I'm correct. Antonelli is in P5. That is great as a rookie. Again, we'll see how things play out as the Ferraris move up. He might move down. Same with Alex Albon, who's in P6. 16 points already for Alex Albon is huge. I think that will make a big difference in the bottom 10, because I don't think he'll stay up here necessarily. But this could put him in a P11, P12 when he otherwise would have been quite lower down. Ocon is up in P7 as well with 10 points. That will feel good. That's a big boost. Again, all these early points, when you compare that Hadjar, Gasly, Lawson, Doohan, Bortoleto, Alonso don't have any points, and already having 10 points, that will make a big difference over the course of the season. Even as things even out and other teams move up and move down, this will make a difference. Ferraris with Hamilton in P9 and Leclerc in P10 with 9 and 8 points respectively. Yeah, they've really got to pick it up. Because when you have 9 and 8 points versus Norris with 44, if I'm already predicting that Leclerc was going to win the championship and he's that down, if things don't change dramatically and quickly, it's over. Alonso at the bottom as well. Like I said, such a shame for him. I hope for his sake that things turn around and he can get a bit more of a boost, because again, if he's not enjoying it, what's the point? Points for Hülkenberg, he's up in P6, or he's in P11, but he's got 6 points again. That will make a big difference over the season. I said considering how poor the Sauber is, but again, I'm not quite sure that the Sauber really is poor. Lawson is above Doohan, but below Gasly, all of which with 0 points. That's just kind of averaging out the finishes. Doohan in P18 is good, all things considered, and Pierre Gasly only in P16 is good for Doohan. Lawson P17, it feels like he should be lower down. I think it's just I think that comes down to who DNF'd and when. And Lawson is the worst of all Racing Bulls, because Hadjar is in P15 with, again, 0 points. Felt like he should have at least 1 point. Whatever. Yeah. I don't want to talk about that anymore, even though we're about to talk about Red Bull again in a second. Let's move on to the team standings here. So McLaren in P1 with 78 points, Mercedes in P2 with 57 points. That's already a bit more of a gap than I thought there would be, especially when you consider Red Bull is down in 36 and Ferrari is down in 5th with 17 points. Oh, the Williams is above Ferrari. If you're Carlos Sainz, you feel good about that. And I'm a Carlos fan, but I'm also a Ferrari fan, so I don't like this. This is not right. This needs to change immediately because they're tied for points, but based on finishing position, the Williams is ahead. Wow. Yeah, they've got to, and again, like their racing can fix it. I think they'll get there over the season, but if it's as competitive as we think the season is, and it's going to be these 2 bad weekends here will make a difference. Again, the Mercedes in P2 is higher than I thought that they would be, again, due to Antonelli doing better than I thought. Williams with P4 and that 17 points will be a huge boost for them. I think they're still going to end up in the midfield battle. No way in hell are they actually going to finish below the Ferrari. But we have them in P17 or P4 with 17 points and the Haas in 6th with 14 points, then Aston Martin with 10 points. Those are enough to make a difference. Again, things will change over the season, but with this, that's enough of a gap to be a difference over the course of the season, especially if Lawson never picks back up, or the Aston Martin, and because Stroll's been doing decently. If Alonso picks back up and getting points, that means less likely for points for Williams and the Haas. So this could be a difference maker over the course of the season already. No points for Alpine. They're the only team with no points. They're down in P10, which is a surprise. Again, they were so good at the end of last year that it's really surprising that they're down here. It's due to like just poor luck with Jack Doohan, or it's hard to say it like poor luck. It's just not panning out right. And also same as going for Gasly, which is a good thing for Doohan, but bad thing for the team. I don't think Franco Colapinto would perform any better, so I think we're solid to stay there. But this could really come back to bite them again as things change over the season. It might be harder for them to get into the points, so their lack of points now could be quite consequential. And Sauber is up higher than I thought they would be in P8 with 6 points. Again, I think I'm just so shocked that they've made any improvement for last season where they were just nowhere. So I'm happy to see this. Racing Bull is down in P9 with 3 points. They should be higher. Again, both of them, Isaac and Tsunoda, are not getting the outcome that their performance deserved, and I hope that changes next race when maybe they have some better strategy things and the front wings don't just decide to randomly break. Let's talk about Red Bull now. There's been a lot of talk already. It seems that they're acknowledging for real, seriously this time, that there's a serious problem with the car. Not just they obviously never wanted to acknowledge that because it seemed that there was issues stemming from Spain in 2023. So for them to have never changed anything and to really acknowledge the issue until Max started losing last year was an issue, it seemed that they maybe didn't even take it seriously enough because they just thought, oh, well, Perez is not a great driver, so that it's now worse with Liam Lawson. I think it's a wake-up call to them about how hard the car is to drive. But that has led that there has been rumors, I think stemming from Helmut Marko, that he said it's not confirmed that Max will finish the season in the Red Bull. He can move down to the Racing Bull. Girl, oh my God. How bad are you of a team if you have to move down to your sister team? Jeez. Like, that's just on principle, like, whoa. But I'd kind of rather that than have, like, Yuki move up to the Red Bull and swap him for Liam Lawson, because I think that car is just bad, and I think the second seat is cursed. Again, I really don't think anybody could do better there. Like, maybe a bit marginally compared to Liam Lawson, but, like, I think it's just bad. I think it's just too hard to do, and I don't think Isaac or Yuki deserve that. I think especially, well, I want both of them to keep racing, and one of them will. I think Isaac will probably stay on within Red Bull next season, even including Arvin Lindblad moving up. I think Yuki is out next season and he'll go somewhere else, so there's room there for movement. But especially that's why I want Yuki to stay in the Racing Bull to keep being able to prove himself. I think if you went there, that's kind of like if you go to the Red Bull and you don't look good, that's kind of career suicide. Even though people can like reasonably acknowledge that the car is bad, it's easier to convince somebody to give you a seat when you're performing well. I've heard that maybe there's a connection to Franco Colapinto back to the Red Bulls somehow. I think people are just saying things. Oh my God, I think people are just saying things. But it seems that there is like serious rumors that Yuki could move up to the Red Bull, especially for the Japanese Grand Prix next weekend. Oh, I hope not. I really don't want that. I really don't want that. But yeah, it seems that they're in a crisis. They, like, as much as I criticize McLaren for having two number one drivers and how's that going to work out, but then the opposite of that is Red Bull. You've been making the car for one person. Like my sister said today, you almost wish that Red Bull could just race with one driver. You wish they didn't have to have a second car, but that's not how F1 works. And you can't just be making a car that only one person can drive and then never be able to have a second person in there. I think that they're in a bit like a real crisis, Red Bull. I think because they're not even performing to Max's standards necessarily. I think maybe he'll give 2026 a try, but like what's the incentive for Max? I think Max is really only here as long as he has a shot at winning the Drivers' Championship. And if it doesn't feel that, I don't think there's any reason for him to even want to stay in F1. He's kind of made it clear that he's interested in trying other series while he's still in his prime. But I do kind of think it is a problem for Red Bull until he leaves, because Max's talent is kind of an issue, because if he can drive the really difficult but fast cars, that's what you're going to want to make for him, because that's what is going to make the difference and lock everybody else out. When that's not working anymore, and it's obviously not, that's a big problem. And that's a big issue with Constructors' Championship, which as much as they seem to neglect, you can't neglect that so much to the point that you're going to seriously drop down and you have one driver not able to do anything. I don't know. I think we'll have to see how the max of it all plays out. And I think once he eventually leaves, they're going to have to do some serious rebuilding and changing of some philosophies within that team, because they can't just keep having one driver. They can't build their whole team around one driver. It doesn't work that way. Even Ferrari is building around Charles, but they've let Lewis in and he's obviously performing well. You've got to have two people able to make the car work. I don't know. Be interesting to see how that plays out the rest of the season. And with that, that's kind of all I have to say. I kind of yapped quite long today. Started at 2:46. No race next weekend. There probably will still be a podcast episode for me next weekend. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about, and I will see you all for my next podcast episode next weekend and race review the weekend after that. In case you aren't aware, this series, my podcast, everything is available both on YouTube and all podcasting platforms, so you can listen to me, you can watch me, whatever you like, change it up depending on your mood. So with that in mind, please like this video, subscribe, rate this 5 stars, share it with your friends, all of the things, comment, and I will see you next week.